Welcome to a very special episode of Secrets Worth Sharing, all about having difficult conversations on child sexual abuse, but with serious joy. Today, I'm joined by my fiancé. We are here to talk about our relationship and how we've managed my journey around child sexual abuse. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
I'm Michael, or Tig, to pretty much everyone I know. Sophia and I have been dating for almost 7 years, and then in 2022, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. So we've been engaged for almost a year now.
Couple of things to note. So obviously we're only talking about our experience, and we are a couple where I'm a woman, he's a man. You've not had the experience of child abuse.
Nope.
So there's that dynamic as well. We're exclusive, all of those kinds of things. Even though that's not the same relationship structure as a lot of people have, we're hoping that you can take something from quite a raw conversation and maybe think about how that might factor into your own situation. Normally what I do in these episodes is I ask people what are 2 positive things you've heard and 2 negative things you've heard. But seeing as our experience is quite wrapped up together, or at least your experience with this topic is wrapped up in mine, I thought what we could do is respond to some chats we've had in the past about good and bad reactions.
Okay. You might want to really talk about it one day, and then suddenly you might just want to suddenly stop talking about it. Or the next day, you just want to not think about it at all and you want that distraction. And it's very hard to gauge that if the other person doesn't communicate it. But often the other person isn't completely aware necessarily that they want to talk about it. It's just a matter of getting used to it and actively trying to pick up cues. It's not up to me when we have that chat. And if I was to suddenly bring that chat up when you weren't expecting it, that can be really sort of not a nice thing to deal with.
I don't think I'd mind that though.
Okay.
At least at this stage. A lot of the time I've worried about, am I being the burden by bringing this up all the time? But realistically, this bothers me more than it bothers you, right? So for me to bring it up to you, it's not that as big a deal. But I equally, if you brought it up to me, would be happy that you were instigating it a bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never
Which is funny.
Never would have thought that.
And I also would never have known that sometimes I have days where I don't want to talk about it and sometimes where I do. I didn't actually notice that until you said it just now.
It's so connected to things outside of the trauma or whatever. It's so connected to whether you've had a long day at work, if you're a bit hungry or something like that. You know, you can
Food
never...
is a big one.
Yeah, you can never quite judge these things.
But I wouldn't want someone watching this to feel like if there was something they wanted to ask their partner but they weren't sure, that they should have to wait till the partner brings it up. Because sometimes it is a weight off the person when someone asks them the question. Okay, let's move to some better responses. So what particularly do you think works well in our relationship? Because I know you've said a lot about being more of the support and how that plays out realistically.
What has really helped with me, not to blow my own trumpet too much, but has been to take my own ego out of the question. You hear other people talking about it when they're disclosing what's gone on to them to another person. Just remove yourself, remove your need to share a bit of yourself with a person. It's a natural human reaction to almost want to share in someone's pain and say, oh, I'm like you, you know. I think this is one of the few instances where actually just keep it to yourself. You can raise that at another time. You can share your emotions at another time. I think I have actually been quite good at that. And it's probably because, you know, emotionally I'm not too I don't display my emotions hugely. So again, that is almost a privilege in this sort of case when you're trying to...
Yeah, but it's something we should work on too.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Don't think you get away from it that easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, disassociation. So disassociation is another side effect that I only started to experience 10 years after my abuse. And it was around the time we were getting together. You know how I describe it? It's like, you know, you're really tired and then you fall asleep and then you feel like you're falling and you jump back awake. It's kind of like that. And I started to get this feeling, and I remember I went to the doctor about it and she said, oh, there's a name for this and it's called disassociation. I think you have depression. Would you like me to put you on some antidepressants? And I was like, whoa, I've just come to the GP with these weird headaches and you're telling me this. So then I was like, I personally don't think that depression is the diagnosis. Let's spend some time talking it through. And it was a symptom that I'd never had with anyone else. So I didn't even know what my own boundaries were. and how you should help me deal with it. And that was another one we really had to figure out together.
Yeah, that was another one where I was trying to remind you of exactly where you are and your context, right?
Yeah.
Like, one of the ways that I see your trauma is that your mind subconsciously keeps trying to drag you back into the past, drag you back out of your present. So when you're disassociating, I put my hand on the back of your head and I say, this is the back of your head. And then I make you look at me, because often you can't focus on anything. Your eyes go blurry and you just kind of stare at the floor. But then I sort of say, okay, here's the back of your head and here's me. It's almost like you're reminded and forced back into your present.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of fascinating, I guess.
And I just remember being in that moment, and then you'd be like, come and meet my eyes, because I'd be like here, and I'm like, I can't move my head. If I move my head, I'll get that weird feeling. And you're just like, just come, and then you'd like move yourself like here, and you'd be like, just try and meet my eyes, and gradually, because the minute I move my head and I'm free, then it's fine. But again, there was so many things where in that moment, I'm not aware of my own emotions, and it was you just being a bit perceptive. And you do have a very logical mind.
Pretty much always happens when we're in like crowded restaurants with music, smell, sight, but that's somehow then overlaid with the trauma of the abuse. And
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And I think it, again, if it wasn't for the fact that bad news I received about the abuser coming out of jail and I didn't know, that piece of knowledge really shocked me and led to these dissociative events. But in that moment, I'm not thinking about my abuser or the abuse or anything like that.
Sure.
But I definitely know there's a link, because it only ever started happening after that moment. Having you to like go on that journey with me and just like be that voice to be like, oh, I've noticed these things, let's try this. It really helped.
Yeah, because you can't observe yourself.
No.
I mean, you need someone there to watch you and try and understand it. That's a case, I suppose, of where a logical approach has actually helped rather than an emotional one.
And going back to the thing with your hands, I think one of the things that a therapist did tell me was, it's really interesting that at the same time in your life that you've learnt to love and trust someone again on such a deep and intimate level, you're having these thoughts about someone who you trusted the least. You're merging those two things together and your brain's trying to separate them. Now, I don't know. We don't know enough about that theory to kind of say if it's true or not. But I thought it was a really interesting comparison. A side of me, like the disassociation has only ever happened around best friends, you, family. That's it. And so, throw me in a crowd and I'll be singing karaoke and it's fine. But for some reason, there's just those little pockets of moments where that happens. But we know how to deal with it now. And thanks to your process that we figured out over the years, when it happened to me in Brighton a few months ago, and I was with a friend, I was literally in the moment, in the disassociation. And I was like, okay, this is something that happens to me. You just need to touch the back of my head and hold my hand and just get me to look in your eyes eventually. And I just need to move my head and then I'll be fine. And then she did it. And I was like, okay, that was good. Yeah. And then the other day we walked past that bakery and she's like, do you remember when that happened? I was like, yeah, I do. So, but yeah, I guess now I know what to try and do if I notice that happen to someone else. I think it's such a beautiful and great example of someone not necessarily knowing what's the best for them, but needing to figure it out with somebody else. And you provided that support for me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. No, I'm genuinely proud about that.
There's been two things in our relationship that I think you've done really, really well. The first thing is all that kind of logical steps, particularly around my side effects of abuse and my PTSD and my disassociation, that I would not have necessarily noticed myself. So a great example of that is when I disassociate and you go, like, your head's here, look at me, and then slowly like move your head to look me in the eye and things like that. And then starting to notice the frequency of it and all of that kind of thing. It's the side of dealing with the abuse that I wouldn't have even thought of. And especially because it's a physical side of it that affects us in our relationship quite a lot. So it's nice that you thought to take on that mental weight, I guess, without me even realising that I needed someone to do it. The second one that I've been really grateful for is the fact that you've been so fine with me seeking advice on this topic from other people outside of you. And I think that really goes along with the point about you having to put your ego aside, right? Like, you are comfortable and okay with the fact that sometimes I have to talk to my ex about the Vietnamese context of this. And I think that's it. It's like, me going to other people doesn't mean that you're not still the most important person in my life. It's just there's angles of this that I know would take me so much longer to educate you and for you to kind of have to get into the sides, and some things that you won't ever have the experience on. And sometimes it's nice to just be able to speak to a fellow victim, a fellow Vietnamese, a fellow friend and survivor, or whatever it is. And then the thing that we have in our relationship is processing that from the PTSD side, the side effects side, the physical things. And then also these much deeper questions about family and children and future and our relationship. So we should never downplay how that can make someone feel, and also how big it is to remove yourself from the situation in that way.
Yeah, well, glad to hear that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening. As I always say, please make sure you tell at least one person, because you would be amazed at the sort of responses you might get, and you will be amazed that you might be planting the seed for other people to talk about this. And thank you, because I know that was quite a big deal for you.
Yeah, it was tough. A bit scary, but glad I did it.
Yeah, it's just another step of our journey. Yeah.
Definitely.
If you want more bite-sized content, we also have a webisode version of this episode called The Secret's Out, which focuses on more do's and don'ts for your own conversation. Find us on YouTube or by going to www.secretsworthsharing.com.